Hi, everybody. So I got a question that is a wonderful question, and it's something that I wrestled with for quite a while trying to figure out this sabbatical cycle, Jubilee cycle, which day it all starts on, all of that. And Leviticus 25 is the chapter in question. This is a chapter from the law. The law is contained really starting in Exodus, although there are some legal things presented in Genesis that make their way into the law, which begins in Exodus. Specifically, this hinges off of the days of creation. From Genesis 2, after God created on the 6 days, he completed creating in 6 days, declared everything very good, and then on the 7th day he rested from his labors. This was written into the law for the people to follow in that same pattern in Exodus 20, where they were to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, to remember the 6 days in which God created, and on the 7th day he rested. So they are to honor that. And then it was written into the law further regarding the land, which is the chapter that we come to in Leviticus 25. That in the same pattern as was established by God in Genesis 2 and for the people in Exodus 20, it is also for the land. Starting in Leviticus 25. And before I even get into this conversation, part of the lack of clarity on which day is being looked at here for the start of these periods of time, we need to keep in mind that we're talking about years, not days in this context. Yes, there is a specific day upon which the count begins, but then it leads into a pattern of years. And so in this chapter, we are to keep in mind that we're talking about years, not days. There is a verse here which regards a specific day. This is where confusion comes from, is because we think that that's giving you a starting point for the years, or some people think that that's giving you a starting day for the years to be counted, and that is not accurate. So we're going to see how this all works out. Leviticus 25:1. The Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. Let us not confuse the text by making this say anything other than what it does. It says, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. What day did Israel come into their land? This is a one-time benchmark starting point. It happened one time and one time only. When that time came, it had a day, a month, and a year attached to it. That is a precise one-time starting point for what they are going to be talking about. So before we go any further, we need to establish, when did Israel come into the land? This is a legal command. It is given one time, and it is predicated upon, established upon, fixed upon this one-time entry date into the promised land. Joshua 4:19. So let's go to Joshua 4:19. And the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and encamped in Gilgal in the east border of Jericho. Jericho was in the promised land. It's the first city they overtook in their conquest for Canaan. They moved into their promised land on the 10th day of the first month, which is the month of Nisan, Nisan 10. The year that we're going to go with, just because we need one to establish this, is 1406 BC. Could it have been 1 year or another move from that? Whatever. We just need a starting point. So we're going to go with the common day of 1406 BC. Regardless of the year, this is a surety that the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. And then 4 days later, they celebrated the Passover, specifically pinpointing you to the 10th day of the month of Nisan. So that is what we need to know. Nisan 10 is the day that's going to factor into the fulfillment of the command given in Leviticus 25. Nisan 10, 1406 BC. That is all you need to know as far as starting points go for what is going to be discussed, because it is all based upon the one-time entry date into the promised land. So we really need to have that in mind when we continue along, because if we come to other dates, that is not what they will refer to. What this chapter is referring to as a starting point is fulfilled in Joshua 4:19. So when you come to terms with that understanding, when you encounter other dates, you will immediately know that that is not what they are referring to. So, Leviticus 25:2. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep the Sabbath unto the Lord. So the Sabbath cycles begin on Nisan 10 of 1406 BC. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a rest, a Sabbath of rest. Sorry, I just want to make sure this is recording. Okay. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord, of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither shalt thou gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. The Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, for thy servant, for thy maid, for thy hired servant, for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee, for thy cattle, for thy beasts that are in the land, shall all the increase thereof be meat. Thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. This is what I did here. You have 7 years here and 7 weeks of years, 49. 49, 49, 49. So, and then I have the first year of each highlighted because that will be the Jubilee. This is where confusion comes in. If you are not solidly founded upon the fact that this starts when Israel came into the land as a one-time event, which occurred on Nisan 10 and Joshua 4:19, this next verse will confuse you. This is why so many people think that the Jubilees begin, the Jubilee years begin on Tishri 10 because of verse 9. This is an independent verse. Even though it is in the middle of verses 8 and 10, which discuss Jubilee years, this is an independent verse. How do we know that? Because it discusses a day, not years, but a day in which something is supposed to occur. Is the day that it discusses Nisan 10? No, it is not. So you know that it actually doesn't have anything to do with the start of a period of Sabbath cycles or Jubilee, because the Jubilee, as we're going to find out, is just another day, just another year in the Sabbath cycles, which all begin on Nisan 10. We've already established that from verse 2. So this verse 9 here has nothing to do with Jubilee years. It has to do with a one-time, on a specific day, declaration of Jubilee. And we're going to go to the book of Hebrews to understand why that would be. Thou shalt cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month in the day of atonement. You shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. Again, we know that this doesn't have anything to do with the start of Sabbath cycles because those are Nisan 10 as we already established. So this is different. Let's continue. And ye shall hallow the 50th year. Okay? Well, if you take verse 9 out and just keep reading verse 8, then 10 in sequence, you have a set of something you're supposed to do with years and then more correlating to years. Thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, the space of 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years, and you shall hallow the 50th year. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you. You shall return every man unto his possession. You shall return every man unto his family. That is what is supposed to occur in a specific year, the duration of which is, 360 days, whatever, but it relates to the 50th year of a cycle that was established on Nisan 10, 1406 BC. This is what that looks like. You have the beginning point, the one-time entry point, Nisan 10, 1406. 7 years times 7 years, a space of 49 years, and in the 50th year, hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. All of these years in the weeks, and all of these weeks in the 7 Sabbath cycles, and all of the Jubilees, which are also year 1 of the next cycle, are going to begin on Nisan 10. This is what it means to deal with the years, the Jubilee years, and then you can very easily determine what they're going to be by using the same method of counting. It's current year plus or minus 49, depending on whether you're in BC or AD to get to the next one. And as you can see, because my little formula up here, if you can't see, it's just this minus 49 to get to that. And as you can see, they're all going to apply. I have the first 4 listed. And all you need to know to determine what the final one is how many you need to count. This part is simple. What confuses people is this clause here, this independent verse here, and I say independent because that verse 8 ends with a period and verse 9 ends with a period. They are not contingent upon one another. They are independent verses. So when you go from 8 to 10, it's just a seamless transition from 49 to the 50th, and then the rest of the chapter talks about what that 50th Jubilee year looks like. But again, when we plot these out, we learn that the 50th year is the first year of the next cycle. Every year in the cycles, every Jubilee year, every Sabbath year, whatever, they all begin on Nisan 10 because that was Leviticus 25:2's starting point. So what we need to look at here then is, and this is where the book of Hebrews is really important to I know people avoid the book of Hebrews. It's my favorite, to be honest. And you're not going to understand a whole bunch of legal stuff from the Old Testament, from a New Testament perspective, unless you understand the book of Hebrews. This is forward-looking to the ministry of Christ. Very simply put, and I don't have a lot of time left in this video, so if you want me to go through this again, I can. Hebrews 10:1. For the law, this is from Leviticus, this is a legal thing. The majority of this was fulfilled on Nisan 10, 1406 BC, but this Day of Atonement, forward looking to the first day of the ministry of Christ. The law having a shadow of good things to come, but not the very image of those things. How do we know that that's specifically what it's talking about? Well, let's go to Hebrews 10. For the law having a shadow of good things to come, but not the very image of those things. So it was forward looking to something else. Tishri 10, the Declaration of Jubilee, the 10th day of the 7th month, has nothing to do with the start of any of the years, any week of years, any of the weeks, or any of the Jubilees. That's Nisan 10. So what is this Tishri 10 thing? The law is a shadow of things to come. Can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered, because if the worshippers once purged would have had no more conscience of sins. But in those sacrifices there is a remembrance again made of sins every year, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. This is talking about the Day of Atonement, specifically Leviticus 16, when 2 animals would be presented alive to the high priest. The blood of bulls would be sacrificed. The bull would be sacrificed for the house of the high priest in his house for their sins. And then 2 live goats would be presented at the door of the tabernacle, one to make atonement for the sin of Israel, and the other as a scapegoat, to have all the sins of Israel laid upon their head. This literally was relating to the Day of Atonement. What is the Day of Atonement according to the law? Well, you go to Leviticus 23, and it tells you the Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month. This specifically is going to be related to something that happens with Jesus when he comes. It's forward looking to the ministry of Christ, which began on the 10th day of the 7th month. I don't have enough time in this video to tell you how we know that, but very simply put, the end of his ministry was Nisan 10, triumphal entry, Palm Sunday. His ministry was an even 3.5 years. If you count back 3.5 years from Nisan 10, you get to Tishri 10. His baptism was John the Baptist laying all the sins of Israel upon his head. Jesus, per Leviticus 16, assuming the role of the scapegoat, which is the substitutionary sin bearer for Israel. And this, Leviticus 25:9, was forward-looking to Isaiah 61, fulfilled in Luke 4. The declaration of Jubilee on the 10th day of the 7th month. Because what follows Jesus becoming the substitutionary sin bearer? Liberty via the forgiveness of sin. That is what the Old Testament concept of Jubilee equates to in the New Testament, is liberty via the forgiveness of sin. There was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. When he had opened the book, he found the place where it is written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, has sent me to heal the brokenhearted,